girl defended a poor man on the bus. The next morning, a luxury car went to his school. The autumn breeze rustled through Emma Walker's dark hair as she waited at the bus stop, clutching her worn backpack close. At 17, she had mastered the art of stretching every dollar, evident in the carefully mended hem of her school uniform and the meticulously maintained second-hand textbooks peeking out of her bag. The familiar rumble of the 7:15 a.m. bus approached, right on schedule, her daily chariot to Riverside High School. Emma climbed aboard, flashing her monthly pass to the driver who'd become accustomed to her bright morning smile. As she made her way down the crowded aisle, the usual symphony of morning commuters filled her ears. The clicking of laptops, mumblings into phones, and the rustle of newspaper pages. She found her usual spot near the middle of the bus, settling in for the 40-minute journey across town. 3 stops later, the routine morning atmosphere shifted. A man in tattered clothes stepped onto the bus, his weathered face partially hidden beneath an old baseball cap. His jacket, despite obvious attempts at repair, bore the marks of time and wear. Emma noticed how he kept his eyes downcast, carefully counting out his fare and small change. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate and palpable. A group of well-dressed businessmen near the front wrinkled their noses, while 2 women in expensive suits whispered behind their manicured hands. The man, who appeared to be in his 50s, made his way down the aisle, clearly aware of the judgmental stares following his every move. "Look what the cat dragged in." A young executive sneered loudly enough for everyone to hear, earning several snickers from nearby passengers. "Guess this isn't the garbage truck he usually rides." Emma's hands tightened around her backpack straps as she watched the man's shoulders hunch further, his dignity crumbling with each step. He stopped near her row, gripping the overhead handle with work-worn hands. "Hey, old-timer," another voice called out. "The homeless shelter's the other direction." More laughter rippled through the bus. The man's fingers trembled slightly on the handle, and something in Emma snapped. Years of watching her single mother face similar prejudices, of knowing what it felt like to be judged by appearance rather than character, fueled her next actions. Standing up abruptly, Emma's voice cut through the cruel laughter. "And exactly what makes you better than him?" The bus fell silent, all eyes turning to the teenage girl in the simple school uniform. "Is it your expensive suit that probably cost more than some people's monthly rent? Or maybe it's your ability to mock someone you know nothing about?" The businessman who'd made the first comment scoffed. "Stay out of this, little girl. You don't understand how the real world works." Emma's eyes flashed with determination. "Actually, I understand perfectly. I understand that real character isn't shown by how expensive your clothes are or what job you have. It's shown by how you treat others, especially those you think can't benefit you in any way." She turned to the man in the tattered clothes, who was staring at her with an unreadable expression. "Sir, would you like to sit down?" She gestured to her seat, her voice gentle but firm. The man's eyes, previously hidden beneath his cap, met hers briefly. For a moment, Emma caught a glimpse of something unexpected, not shame or defeat, but a sharp, calculating intelligence that seemed to pierce right through her. He nodded slowly, murmuring a quiet, "Thank you," as he took the offered seat. The rest of the ride passed in uncomfortable silence, the previous mockers suddenly finding their phones and newspapers intensely interesting. Emma stood beside the seated man, her presence like a shield against further harassment. As her stop approached, she gathered her things, conscious of the man's gaze following her movements. What Emma didn't notice as she stepped off the bus was how the man's eyes lingered on the Riverside High School emblem emblazoned on her uniform jacket. Nor did she see him pull out a sleek phone that seemed at odds with his shabby appearance, his fingers moving swiftly across the screen. As the bus pulled away, Emma hurried toward her school, already wondering if she'd be late for first period. She had no way of knowing that her simple act of kindness had just set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. Behind her, the man in tattered clothes watched through the bus window, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he made a single, decisive phone call. The morning sun continued its climb into the sky, casting long shadows across the city streets, while somewhere in a luxury office downtown, a team of assistants began gathering information about a teenage girl named Emma Walker, who had just demonstrated the one quality their boss valued above all others: genuine compassion in a world that often seemed to have forgotten its importance. The sleek elevator ascended silently to the penthouse floor of Sterling Towers, one of the city's most prestigious business addresses. As the doors opened, the man from the bus, Daniel Sterling, stepped out, his transformation already underway. Gone was the hunched posture and weathered baseball cap. In their place, a straight-backed confidence that commanded attention. A waiting assistant rushed forward with a garment bag containing his usual attire, a tailored Seville rose suit. "How was your morning experiment, Mr. Sterling?" Sarah Chin, his chief of staff, fell into step beside him as they walked toward his private suite. "Illuminating," Daniel replied, his voice carrying none of the timidity it had held on the bus. "And disturbing. 23 people on that bus, Sarah. 23 people who looked straight through me as if I were invisible. Except for one." Inside his private bathroom, Daniel shed the carefully crafted disguise he'd worn for his social experiment. As he washed away the artificial weathering from his face, he studied his reflection, the sharp features of a man who had built a $4.2 billion empire from the ground up. At 53, Daniel Sterling was known in business circles as the ghost philanthropist, famous for his unorthodox approach to charity and his belief that true character revealed itself in unguarded moments. "Tell me about the girl," Sarah said, organizing the day's schedules on her tablet as Daniel emerged, now dressed in his usual impeccable attire. "Emma Walker," Daniel said, the name carrying a weight of significance. 17 years old. Riverside High School student. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his mind replaying the morning's events. "What have you found?" Sarah swiped through her tablet. "Lives with her single mother, Catherine Walker, in the East District. Mother works 2 jobs, morning shift at a local diner and evening receptionist at a dental clinic. Emma maintains a 4.0 GPA while working part-time at a bookstore on weekends. No disciplinary issues, active in the school's community service club." She paused, looking up. "She's exactly the kind of person you've been looking for, isn't she?" Daniel's fingers traced invisible patterns on the window glass. "Do you know what struck me most, Sarah? It wasn't just that she defended me. It was how she did it. There was no performative kindness, no cell phone recording for social media fame, no expectation of reward. She stood up because it was right, even though it made her a target." He turned to face his chief of staff, his expression intense. "I've spent 6 months conducting these experiments. Sitting in park benches looking homeless, dropping wallets full of cash to see who returns them, pretending to be lost or in need of help. Do you know how many people show genuine compassion without an audience? 3. Out of hundreds." Moving to his desk, Daniel pressed a button on his intercom. "James, bring in the Phoenix Project files." Minutes later, his financial advisor entered with a thick folder. "The scholarship program documents you requested, sir." Daniel took the folder, spreading its contents across his mahogany desk. The Phoenix Project was his latest philanthropic venture, a comprehensive scholarship program designed to support promising students who demonstrated exceptional character. It had been in development for months, waiting for the right candidate to launch it. "Sarah, I want everything arranged by tomorrow morning. Contact Riverside High School's administration. Have our legal team prepare the scholarship documents. And most importantly, make sure the press stays away. This isn't about publicity. There's something else you should know about Emma Walker." Sarah interjected, her voice softer. "Her mother's dental clinic is closing next month. The owner's selling the building. She'll lose her evening job." Daniel's jaw tightened. He remembered his own mother's struggles, the nights she went hungry to feed him, the pride that kept her from accepting handouts. Add a job offer for Catherine Walker to the package. Executive assistant position at the Sterling Foundation. Full benefits, flexible hours. As his team sprang into action, Daniel returned to the window. Below, the city sprawled out like a giant chessboard, millions of lives intersecting in countless ways. He thought about Emma, probably sitting in class right now, unaware that her act of kindness was about to change not only her life but potentially thousands of others through the Phoenix Project. One more thing, he called out to Sarah, who paused at the door. The car for tomorrow, make it the Rolls-Royce Phantom. Silver. Making quite a statement, aren't we? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Daniel smiled, but his eyes remained serious. Tomorrow isn't just about rewarding one girl's kindness, Sarah. It's about sending a message to every student in that school. Character matters. Compassion matters. And sometimes, when you least expect it, doing the right thing can change everything. As the sun climbed higher over the city, Daniel Sterling began preparing for the next day's revelation. In his private calendar, he made a note. Day 1 Phoenix Project launch. Below it, he wrote a quote that had guided his life since he'd built his first company from nothing. True wealth isn't measured by what's in your bank account, but by how many lives you change. Tomorrow, he would step out of the shadows, trading his carefully crafted disguise for his true identity. Tomorrow, he would show one brave young woman that in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent, kindness still had the power to create miracles. But for now, he had preparations to make. Preparations that would ensure Emma Walker's life would never be the same again. The fluorescent lights of Henderson's books flickered slightly as Emma restocked the self-help section, her movements quick and efficient despite her exhaustion. It was 6:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, and she'd been on her feet since dawn. The small bookstore tucked away in a quiet corner of the city had become her weekend sanctuary, but today she was covering an extra shift for a sick coworker. Emma, dear, Mrs. Henderson called from the register. Don't forget you have that calculus test tomorrow. You should head home soon. Emma smiled at the elderly bookstore owner while sliding the last book into place. Mrs. Henderson had become something of a second grandmother to her over the past year, often sneaking her home-baked cookies and letting her study during slow periods. Just finishing up, Mrs. H. Emma replied, brushing dust from her jeans. Her school uniform was carefully packed in her bag, changed out of immediately after classes to prevent wear and tear. They couldn't afford a new one until next semester. As she gathered her things, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Working late at the clinic. Leftover lasagna in fridge. Love you. Emma's heart tightened. She knew what working late really meant. Her mother was probably taking extra patience, trying to earn as much as possible before the clinic's closure. The news of the impending shutdown had hit them hard last week, and Emma had overheard her mother's muffled sobs through the thin walls of their apartment late at night. The bus ride home was quieter than the morning commute. Emma used the time to review her calculus notes, the formulas swimming before her tired eyes. Mr. Patterson, her calculus teacher, had pulled her aside after class today, his face stern behind wire-rimmed glasses. Miss Walker, he'd said, your last quiz score was below your usual standard. I hope you're not letting your extracurricular activities interfere with your academic performance. Scholarship committees look very closely at senior year grades. The memory made her fingers clench around her textbook. What Mr. Patterson didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that working wasn't a choice. It was the difference between having electricity and sitting in the dark, between a full pantry and empty cupboards. The apartment was dark when Emma arrived home. She flicked on the lights, revealing the small but meticulously clean living space she shared with her mother. Photos lined the walls: Emma's elementary school graduation, her mom's dental assistant certification, the two of them at the beach 3 summers ago. Happy moments captured in better times. As she heated up the lasagna, Emma's mind wandered to the morning's events on the bus. She wondered about the man she'd defended, hoping he'd made it to wherever he was going without further harassment. A small part of her worried that standing up might have drawn unwanted attention from those businessmen. They looked like the type to hold grudges. Her phone chimed again, this time with a message from her classmate Lily Chin. OMG Emma, did you see Madison's new car? Daddy bought her a BMW for her birthday. She's giving rides to everyone tomorrow. Well, almost everyone. Emma left the message unread, trying to ignore the familiar sting. Madison Williams and her crowd had never let Emma forget her place in Riverside High's social hierarchy. Just yesterday, Madison had loudly discussed her upcoming Sweet 17 party, complete with a yacht rental and celebrity DJ, while pointedly not looking in Emma's direction. After dinner, Emma spread her homework across the small kitchen table. Calculus worksheets competed for space with her English essay and chemistry lab report. The scholarship applications her guidance counselor had given her sat in a neat pile to one side, each one representing a chance at a better future. A distant siren wailed outside as Emma worked, the sound mixing with the hum of the aging refrigerator and the tap-tap-tap of the leaky faucet they couldn't afford to fix. Her mother had taught her that education was the key to breaking the cycle of poverty, and Emma was determined to make her proud. Hours ticked by as she studied, solved problems, and polished her essays. The kitchen clock showed 11:45 p.m. when she heard her mother's key in the lock. Catherine Walker entered quietly, her medical scrubs wrinkled from a long day's work, her face showing the strain of hiding her worries. "You're still up, sweetheart?" her mother asked, setting down her purse and immediately moving to kiss Emma's forehead. "Just finishing up, Mom." Emma smiled, noting the new worry lines around her mother's eyes. "How was work?" "Oh, you know, the usual." Catherine tried to sound cheerful, but Emma caught her glancing at the pile of bills near the microwave. "Dr. Reynolds is trying to help some of us find positions at other clinics, but—" She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "Never mind that now. Did you eat? How was school?" Emma thought about telling her mother about the incident on the bus but decided against it. Her mom had enough to worry about without adding social justice confrontations to the list. "School was fine. Just preparing for tests and working on college applications." Catherine's eyes softened with pride. "You're amazing, you know that? Most kids your age are out having fun, but here you are, working so hard." "I learned from the best," Emma replied, reaching out to squeeze her mother's hand. Later that night, as Emma finally crawled into bed, she could hear her mother making quiet phone calls in the living room, probably reaching out to more clinics for job opportunities. The digital clock on her bedside table read 12:30 a.m. In 6 hours, she'd be back on the bus to school, ready to face another day of challenges. What Emma didn't know, as she drifted off to sleep, was that this would be the last night of her old life. Tomorrow, everything would change, not because of luck or chance, but because she had shown kindness when she thought no one was watching. But for now, she slept, dreaming of a future she could only imagine, while across town, in a penthouse office, the final details of her transformation were being set in motion. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside High School's manicured lawns as students began arriving for another ordinary Thursday. The usual cacophony of teenage life filled the air, scattered laughter, the slam of car doors, and the distant ring of the warning bell. Madison Williams was holding court on the front steps, surrounded by her usual admirers, showing off her new BMW. "Daddy says it's just a starter car," she was saying, tossing her perfectly styled hair. "When I get into Princeton." The words died in her throat as a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom glided through the school gates. Like a ripple in a pond, silence spread across the schoolyard. Students froze mid-conversation, phones raised to capture the unprecedented sight. The luxury vehicle, worth more than most of their parents' houses, moved with ghostly grace along the circular driveway. "Oh my God!" someone whispered. "Is that a Rolls-Royce Phantom?" another voice finished. "The extended wheelbase version. There are only 5 in the entire state." Emma, who had just arrived and was hurrying toward her first class, paused at the unusual quiet. She turned to see what everyone was staring at, her textbooks clutched to her chest. The Phantom came to a stop directly in front of the main entrance. A uniformed chauffeur emerged, his movements precise and practiced as he moved to open the rear door. The crowd of students collectively held their breath. The man who stepped out was immaculately dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than a year's tuition. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his bearing aristocratic. But there was something familiar about him that nagged at Emma's memory. Behind him emerged Sarah Chin, carrying a sleek leather briefcase and tablet, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the awestruck teenagers around her. Principal Roberts burst through the front doors, apparently having been notified of the visitor. "Mr. Sterling! Welcome to Riverside High School. We're honored to have you." "Daniel Sterling?" Madison's voice rose above the murmurs. "The Daniel Sterling? The billionaire?" Emma's heart stopped. The man's posture, the intelligent eyes, now she recognized him without the shabby clothes and haunted expression. The poor man from the bus. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Daniel's eyes swept the crowd, coming to rest on Emma. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth as he saw recognition dawn on her face. "Thank you for the welcome, Principal Roberts." Daniel's voice carried easily across the now silent courtyard. "But I'm actually here to speak with one of your students." He turned fully toward Emma, who felt rooted to the spot. "Miss Walker, I believe we met yesterday morning?" 100 heads whipped around to stare at Emma. Madison's jaw dropped. The whispers erupted immediately. "Emma? Plain Emma Walker? What's going on? Did she say yesterday morning?" Principal Roberts looked between Daniel and Emma, clearly confused. "Miss Walker? Is there something? Perhaps we could use your office for this conversation?" Daniel suggested smoothly. "Miss Walker, would you join us? And please don't worry about your morning classes. This is far more important." Emma felt herself moving forward as if in a dream. The crowd parted before her like the Red Sea, faces showing varying degrees of shock, envy, and disbelief. As she passed Madison, she heard the girl's strangled whisper to her friends. "That's impossible. She's nobody. Her mother works at a dental clinic." Daniel's hand came to rest lightly on Emma's shoulder as they reached the steps. He turned to address the gathered students, his voice carrying an authority that demanded attention. "Many of you are probably wondering why I'm here. Yesterday morning, I conducted one of my regular social experiments, something I've done for months in cities across the country. I dressed as a homeless man and rode public transportation, observing how people treated me when they thought I had nothing to offer them." The color drained from several faces in the crowd as realization dawned. Emma could see some of the students who rode her bus route looking particularly ill. "Your classmate, Emma Walker, was the only person who showed genuine kindness. Not for recognition, not for reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. She defended a stranger's dignity when everyone else chose to mock or ignore him." Sarah Chin stepped forward, opening her briefcase. "Mr. Sterling, the documents are ready." "Thank you, Sarah." Daniel turned back to the stunned audience. "Today marks the launch of the Sterling Foundation's Phoenix Project, a new initiative designed to reward and promote exceptional character in our youth. And Miss Walker will be our first recipient." Emma felt lightheaded. Principal Roberts was beaming now, probably already imagining the publicity this would bring to Riverside High. Madison's new BMW suddenly looked very ordinary next to the Rolls-Royce. As they moved toward the principal's office, Emma heard the explosion of voices behind her, the frantic tapping of phones as students rushed to share the news on social media. She caught fragments of conversations. "Did you see her face? The Phoenix Project? I always knew there was something special about her. Remember when we invited her to study group last month? No, you didn't. You said she wouldn't fit in." The heavy doors closed behind them, muffling the chaos outside. In the relative quiet of the administrative wing, Emma finally found her voice. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. All of this because I..." Daniel held up a hand, his expression gentle but serious. "Because you showed genuine compassion when you thought no one was watching. That, Miss Walker, is the truest test of character. And now," he gestured to the principal's office door, "shall we discuss your future?" Principal Roberts' office had never felt so small. Emma sat perched on the edge of a leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Daniel Sterling and Sarah Chin arranged documents on the mahogany desk. The morning sun streamed through Venetian blinds, creating strips of light that seemed to underscore the surreal nature of the moment. "Miss Walker," Daniel began, his voice gentle but carrying the weight of authority. Are you familiar with the concept of ripple effects? He didn't wait for her answer. One small action can create waves that transform entire communities. Your action yesterday wasn't small. It was extraordinary because it was genuine. Sarah stepped forward, presenting a leather portfolio embossed with the Sterling Foundation logo. The Phoenix Project, she explained, is more than just a scholarship program. It's a comprehensive life transformation initiative. Emma's eyes widened as Sarah opened the portfolio, revealing multiple documents. The first page bore the letterhead of Harvard University. We've been in contact with several prestigious universities, Daniel continued. Based on your academic record and our recommendation, you have guaranteed acceptance to any of the following institutions. He slid forward a list that made Emma's breath catch. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, MIT, Princeton, names that had only existed in her dreams until now. But the application deadlines, Emma began, have been waived. Sarah finished with a small smile. The Sterling Foundation has certain privileges. Principal Roberts, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, leaned forward. This is unprecedented, Miss Walker. In my 20 years of education. There's more, Daniel interrupted, producing another document. The scholarship covers not just tuition, but all living expenses, books, a housing allowance, and a monthly stipend. Additionally, he paused, his eyes kind as he observed Emma's overwhelmed expression. We're offering your mother a position at the Sterling Foundation. Emma's head snapped up. My mother? Executive Assistant to the Director of Healthcare Initiatives, Sarah explained. Full benefits, flexible hours, and a salary that's... She glanced at the figure on the paper. Significantly above her current combined income. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as the magnitude of the moment hit her. No more double shifts for her mother. No more worrying about the clinic closing. No more choosing between textbooks and groceries. Why? The question escaped her lips in a whisper. Daniel stood, moving to the window. Below, students were still clustered in groups, phones out, undoubtedly spreading the news across social media. Because true change requires more than just money, Miss Walker. It requires identifying people with the capacity for genuine compassion and giving them the resources to make a difference on a larger scale. He turned back to face her. The Phoenix Project isn't charity. It's an investment in character. You'll have opportunities to intern at the foundation during summers, to help shape future initiatives, to be part of something bigger than yourself. Emma's hands trembled as she looked through the documents. Numbers jumped out at her, figures that could change not just her life, but her mother's entire future. Yet something made her pause. The others on the bus, she said slowly. The ones who will have to live with the knowledge that they judged someone based on appearance and lost an opportunity because of it. Daniel finished. That's part of the lesson too. Sarah produced one final document. There is a press conference scheduled for next week to officially announce the Phoenix Project. However, she added, seeing Emma's nervous expression, your participation is optional. We can handle the media attention in whatever way makes you comfortable. Principal Roberts cleared his throat. The school would be happy to provide any support necessary. Perhaps an assembly to celebrate. No. Emma's voice was soft but firm. Everyone turned to look at her. I mean, thank you, but I don't want this to be about publicity. That's not why I... She trailed off, remembering the bus, the simple act of standing up for what was right. Daniel's face broke into a genuine smile. And that, Miss Walker, is exactly why you're perfect for this project. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver key. One more thing. There's a car waiting in the parking lot, nothing as flashy as my Phantom, but something reliable for you and your mother to share. Consider it a practical necessity rather than a luxury. Emma stared at the key, then at the documents, then at Daniel. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use this opportunity to continue being exactly who you are, Daniel replied. That's all we ask. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and explanations. Sarah detailed the scholarship terms, the foundation's expectations, maintaining academic excellence and participating in community service initiatives, and the support systems that would be put in place. Principal Roberts excused himself twice to handle the growing crowd of reporters gathering at the school gates. As the meeting wound down, Emma's phone buzzed repeatedly, messages from her mother asking why the school had called her, why there were reporters outside the dental clinic, why her boss had just received a call from the Sterling Foundation. "Go," Daniel said kindly, noticing her distraction. "Sarah will bring all the necessary documents to your home this evening. Take the rest of the day to be with your mother and process everything." He paused, then added, "And Emma? Thank you for reminding an old businessman that there's still genuine goodness in the world." As Emma stepped out of the office, she found the hallways lined with students, all trying to appear casual while stealing glances at her. Madison Williams stood with her group, their expressions a mix of shock, envy, and dawning respect. But for once, Emma barely noticed them. Her mind was already with her mother, imagining the moment she would share the news that their struggles were over. Not because of luck or charity, but because of a simple act of kindness that had created ripples they never could have imagined. The key in her pocket felt warm against her leg as she walked toward the parking lot, ready to begin the first day of her new life. 6 months had passed since that transformative morning at Riverside High School. Spring had painted the city in vibrant colors, and the Sterling Foundation's glass-fronted building reflected the early morning sunlight as Emma walked through its revolving doors. Her confident stride and smart business casual attire were a far cry from the uncertain teenager who had once counted bus fare carefully each morning. The security guard smiled warmly. "Good morning, Miss Walker. The youth committee is already gathering in conference room A." Emma nodded her thanks, adjusting the folder she carried. Inside were applications for the second round of Phoenix Project scholarships, stories of other young people who, like her, had demonstrated extraordinary character in ordinary moments. As the first recipient, Emma had insisted on being part of the selection committee. The elevator carried her to the 15th floor, where she found her mother already busy at her desk outside the Healthcare Initiative's office. Catherine Walker looked years younger, the worry lines around her eyes replaced by laugh lines. She was speaking animatedly on the phone about a new dental care program for underprivileged children, her first major initiative as executive assistant. "Morning, Mom," Emma whispered, dropping a coffee on her desk. Catherine covered the mouthpiece to mouth, "Thank you," before returning to her call. Emma smiled, remembering how her mother had cried when they first visited this office together, how she'd insisted it must be a dream. The conference room was filling up with Foundation staff when Emma entered. On the wall-mounted screen, a news clip played silently, footage from last month's Phoenix Project Gala where Emma had given her first public speech about the importance of everyday kindness. The video showed her standing confidently at the podium, her words moving many in the audience to tears. "There you are!" Daniel's voice came from behind her. He'd taken to appearing unexpectedly, a habit from his days of social experiments that he couldn't quite shake. "Ready to change more lives today?" Emma smiled, setting her materials on the conference table. "Actually, I wanted to discuss an idea with you first." She pulled out a detailed proposal she'd worked on for weeks. "It's about expanding the project's reach." Daniel raised an eyebrow, gesturing for her to continue. "We're doing amazing work with the scholarships," Emma explained. "But I think we can do more. What if we created a mentorship program? Pair each new recipient with someone from their field of interest? I've already spoken to several business leaders and professionals who'd be willing to volunteer their time." Daniel's eyes sparkled with approval as he reviewed her proposal. "You've really thought this through." "I learned from the best," Emma replied. "You didn't just give me a scholarship, you showed me how to turn opportunity into action." The meeting began, but Emma's mind briefly wandered to Riverside High. The school had changed since her story became public. A new kindness initiative, started by students themselves, had taken root. Even Madison Williams, surprisingly, had become one of its strongest supporters. The local bus service had also seen changes. After Emma's story made the news, reports of harassment on public transportation dropped significantly. People never quite knew if that shabbily dressed passenger might be another undercover billionaire, or more importantly, if someone like Emma might be watching. Emma? Daniel's voice brought her back to the present. Would you like to present the first candidate? She opened the folder, pulling out a photograph of a young man who'd used his savings to create a food delivery service for elderly neighbors during a severe winter storm. As she began presenting his story, Emma felt the familiar warmth of knowing she was part of something bigger than herself. Later that afternoon, Emma visited Henderson's Books. The small store had become a regular stop for the Foundation's literacy program, with Mrs. Henderson now coordinating reading sessions for underprivileged children. The elderly shop owner had tears in her eyes when Emma presented her with a grant to renovate and expand the store. "You didn't have to do this," Mrs. Henderson whispered, hugging her tightly. "Yes, I did," Emma replied. "You believed in me before anyone else did." The day ended with Emma and her mother sharing dinner in their new apartment, modest by luxury standards but comfortable and filled with light. Catherine was excitedly discussing plans for the Foundation's upcoming free dental clinic event when Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Check your email. Think you'll want to see this." Emma opened the attachment to find a photograph taken exactly 6 months ago, her first day at the Foundation. She stood beside Daniel, both of them reviewing documents for the Phoenix Project launch. Below the photo was a simple message. "Kindness creates ripples. You've helped us reach over 10,000 people in 6 months. Proud of you." Emma showed the message to her mother, who squeezed her hand. "You know," Catherine said softly, "when you were little, I always told you that being kind was its own reward. I never imagined." "It still is, Mom," Emma interrupted gently. "The scholarship, the Foundation, all of this, they're not rewards for kindness. They're tools to create more of it." Later that night, as Emma stood on their apartment balcony watching the city lights, she reflected on how much had changed since that morning on the bus. She'd learned that single acts of kindness could transform not just individual lives but entire communities. More importantly, she'd learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in the number of lives you touched. Tomorrow, she would help select the next Phoenix Project recipients. Tomorrow, she would continue working on her mentorship program. Tomorrow, she would keep creating ripples of change in a world that desperately needed them. But tonight, Emma Walker, the girl who had once defended a stranger on a bus, smiled at the stars and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe for reminding her that in a world where you can be anything, being kind was still the most powerful choice of all.